So they told me all these things to get me to come back to Chicago for their live show, right? So I come back. I would have gone back anyway, even if they said, we're going to fucking hammer you. I'd have been like, all right. 30 seconds before I walk on that stage, Sherry Salata, who's the executive producer of Oprah, comes over to me and puts her arm around me and says, hey, we just changed the name of the show to from Truth in America to the James Frey Reckoning. It's gonna get a little rough out there.
We just changed it to James Frey is a fucking asshole.
It's gonna get a little rough out there.
I'm David Duchovny, and this is Fail Better, a show where failure, not success, shapes who we are. James Frey is a writer whose best-selling memoir, A Million Little Pieces, caused quite a stir in the early 2000s. The book, which details his struggles with drug and alcohol addiction, was an initial success. That says a lot because it was rejected 17 times before it got picked up by a publisher. Sales then skyrocketed after it was added to Oprah's book club, although I think he says in this interview that it was doing quite well even before that. James then found himself in the middle of a controversy in 2006 after being accused of fabricating parts of the memoir, which he later owned up to and publicly apologized, and we get into that. And his take on that is strong and I think interesting. Stay tuned for that. James is no stranger to failure. He's pretty candid about how he's come back from tough times, hard-won perspective. We also talk about his upcoming book, Next to Heaven, and what it takes to become the greatest writer of his generation, or maybe the most defiant writer of his generation. Here's that conversation. Thanks for coming to talk this morning about everybody's favorite subject, failure.
I've failed a few times in my life, if a few means a few hundred.
Well, what I like to start these conversations, unless there's anything pressing on your mind, is to kind of, I guess in a way the discussion is about if you're going to smash a system, and you've described yourself as kind of a punk rock writer, which I like very much. Where did that original system come from? Who instilled it in you? Who taught you? Who set the bar for you? And when did you decide to kind of create your own system in a way?
Great. That's certainly, I can start now if you want.
Take it away.
You know, like a lot of American kids, I was raised going to public schools, and I was taught, get a job, pay your taxes, get married, be a good boy, have a good life, right? I never believed in any of that. I was always like, why do I have to do any of that? Why do I have to do anything but what I want? And as
where do you
a child,
think that? Where do you think that that contrariness came from? Just born with it? Just something in your soul?
Yeah, man, I was born with it. From my earliest memories were asking people why I had to do what they told me to do, right? Why do I have to follow your rules? Why are your rules more valid than the rules I make? And so I grew up in, I was basically 10 to 20 during the 80s, right? I was 10 to 20 during the 80s. And the 80s were this kind of awesome time where we had fucking Reagan, and we had sort of a reaction to Carter, and we had the beginnings of what we're seeing now, which is almost like a very strict surveillance/control culture. And punks were a real thing in the 80s. We were like, fuck this bullshit. Why do we have to do any of this? Why do we have to go to these dumb schools and learn these dumb rules? It's a joke my own kids say, but like, why the fuck did anybody ever teach me algebra and geometry? Because I didn't ever learn anything, and I've never used them, but spent years trying to master them.
I use algebra daily.
Well, then you must be living a pretty cool life.
Just off camera is an abacus.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
And so my those years were kind of lost. I drank, I did drugs, I got in trouble, I went to shows, I read books. I barely got through high school. I got into college because I was an athlete.
Oh yeah, what sport did you play?
I played soccer. All things.
Okay. It's the world's game, I'm told. I don't play
It is. I grew up a little bit outside of the U.S., so I grew up moving around. So I'd grown up playing soccer, but I just grew up with this sense of, why do I have to do anything that anybody tells me?
Yeah.
Growing up, I was a big reader. So in those years, I was also reading like Bukowski and Henry Miller and Jack Kerouac and Baudelaire and Celine and all these sort of older punk writers who had all said the same thing we all believed. They had just said it, 50 years earlier or 75 years earlier. Yeah, absolutely. I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was 21. I read Tropic of Cancer.
Yeah, my dad too, by the way. My father.
Good taste.
Yeah, my father, born in 1927, Henry Miller blew his mind, and he decided to become a writer after reading those books. So good on you.
Henry Miller, same thing, blew my mind. I ran off to Paris when I was 21 to be a famous writer in 1991. And yeah, it was great. Back then, again, like when I moved to Paris, I wasn't able to really know anything about Paris except what I could find in the encyclopedia.
You didn't speak any French?
Didn't speak any French, didn't know any French people, just took off. Mm-hmm. And it was awesome. It was, and this is what I think is cool about what you talk about, is by any objective measure, those years, I was there for 2 years, and then I came back to the States, and it took me 8 more years to get a book published.
Yeah.
It was immense failure after failure after failure after failure after failure after failure. And I often think of those as some of the greatest times in my life.
Yeah.
Because it was the struggle to get somewhere instead of being there, right? It was the dedication, the work, the reading, the writing, the failing. There's some thrill in everybody around you thinking what your dream is crazy.
Right.
And you locking down and pursuing it in a solitary manner against all odds, right? And
not a lot of encouragement is what I'm hearing either. It wasn't like people were saying, "You're close, you're getting there, you're close."
No, it wasn't ever "you're close, you're getting there." It wasn't ever "you're gifted and talented, it's going to be great." It was, "Are you fucking out of your mind? Like, what the fuck are you doing? You're going to wake up someday and be 55 and you're going to say, what the fuck did you do with your life?" Right. And I may say that occasionally as a 55-year-old, but at least it doesn't have to do with what I do for a living.
I'm in total agreement. Okay, well, let's go to Oprah in a Million Little Pieces then. What a wonderful nightmare for you. I'm sure there have been, I don't mean to gloss over it to this point where we're like, oh yeah, fuck it all, I'm liberated now. Because I'm sure there was real pain involved in there and confusion at some point.
A lot of it.
Yeah. But, because one of the things, on this podcast, I'm talking to, successful people. And so they've gotten past whatever failure they're talking about. And I think what is interesting sometimes is to sit down in the actual moment of it. And because, you've got different roads coming out from this point. There's many different directions you can go at this point. And here you are now, you're okay. That's great. But there was that moment where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to be okay. This feels, I'm ashamed. I'm humiliated. It's not humility. I'm learning here. It's humiliation. So let's speak.
I will say I didn't think of it that way.
Good.
Ever. It was an interesting experience. I had written A Million Little Pieces as like this book that was written to defy rules, to defy convention, to defy genre, right? When we sold the book, it was a big problem because people read it and they were like, well, what is it? And I would always say it's a fucking book.
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's a good answer. But you had tried to sell it as fiction first, is that right?
Well, we did sell it as fiction. Random House bought it as a novel. Mm-hmm. And then when they bought it, in the contract, there was a thing that said there was a chance they would publish it as a memoir. And in that contract, if you're selling a publisher nonfiction, you have to, cop to the veracity of it, which I refused to do. I said, this isn't 100% true. You can publish it however the fuck you want. And then when it came out, I did the dance. They told me, just go say it's true. Everybody does it. So I did that, right? The book got picked by Oprah, and it sold literally millions of copies in a couple months. And I started seeing a therapist around that time because I was suddenly wildly famous, which I never expected. You don't become a sort of punk rock novelist to imagine anybody would ever stop you on a street in fucking Soho and ask for your photo and autograph. But more than that, I really hated being Oprah's boy, right? I didn't want to be the Dr. Phil of fucking addiction on Oprah. Right. I didn't want to be her little guy that she called up when she wanted somebody to give a drug addict a hug. Yeah. I didn't like any of that. So I was overwhelmed by sudden fame and a kind of fame that kind of made me sick to my stomach. And I started seeing this therapist about how do I manage all of this madness, this fucking tsunami that's coming at me? But one of the things I had said to him, which I have said publicly before A Million Little Pieces came out, and I've said it since, is when I got into this, the only game for me, it wasn't to be the punk rock band that played in the local garage. It was to be the fucking Sex Pistols. It was to be the biggest, most controversial, most divisive, most polarizing, most radical writer on the planet. And, it all blew up. And I remember I went back to the therapist that first time after it all blew up. And he was like, you got what you wanted. How's it feel?
This episode of Fail Better is brought to you by Booking.com. Booking.YEAH. From vacation rentals to hotels across the U.S., Booking.com has the ideal summer stay for absolutely anyone, even those who might seem impossible to please. Imagine you're looking for yourself. Easy. You're flexible, but have an eye for luxury. You've got plenty of paths to go down. Now imagine that you're also booking for your partner. And your kids, who tend to be picky about comfort and can get very worked up about sharing spaces. And maybe you're also looking for an in-law who rises earlier than the sun. Well, never fear. You can find exactly what you're booking for on Booking.com. And if you change your mind and decide you actually want something completely different, you can find that too. All on Booking.com. With my cooking skills shaping up, I'm increasingly looking for a place to stay with a nice kitchen. And believe me, there are some beautiful ones out there. The accommodations on Booking.com really cover every possible feature you could think of. And I know I'll find something that meets my standards every time I'm looking to kick back and cook up something nice. Find exactly what you're booking for. Booking.com. Booking.YEAH. Book today on the site or in the app. When you're sitting in that, the dressing down that Oprah's giving you, and at that moment, though, I see two paths at that moment, and I see you kind of, you must have been just kind of like, where do I get purchase here? I don't understand. It's like, I don't know.
This is, Oprah and her people fucking lied to me. They think they're fucking saints, but they're not. When I went back there for that second show, they told me that show I was going to was called Truth in America. And that it was going to be me debating a journalist about literary truth versus journalistic truth.
Oh, okay.
And they said that there was going to be a portion of the show about reality TV where they compared reality TV to the news. Remember, this is 2006.
Yeah,
it's a naive
This is the beginning
time
of everything.
So they told me all these things to get me to come back to Chicago for their live show, right? So I come back. I would have gone back anyway, even if they said, we're going to fucking hammer you. I'd have been like, all right. 30 seconds before I walk on that stage, Sherry Salata, who's the executive producer of Oprah, comes over to me and puts her arm around me and says, hey, we just changed the name of the show to from Truth in America to the James Frey Reckoning. It's gonna get a little rough out there.
We just changed it to James Frey is a fucking asshole.
It's gonna get a little rough out there. Please just and so I walk out there and they slaughter me. And I remember going to the first commercial break.
Yeah.
All the women in the audience start booing me. I'm sitting in fucking Oprah. Oprah just yelled at me, and a bunch of ladies from the Midwest are booing me. And I remember sitting there thinking, you know what, man? There is nothing you can do here. Sometimes you got to take a fucking beating, and when it's over, you get up and you dust yourself off and get ready to go again.
But in many ways, that's exactly what you wanted too. I mean, that was if I understand your ambition when you moved to Paris, it was to be a defiant, vilified in some ways, like Baudelaire or even Henry Miller, author. So sitting there getting booed by the women in that moment must have been in some way the apotheosis of what you were going for, but also what I'm hearing is, it hurts your feelings as well. There's still the little boy in there that's like, what did I do to?
There's still the little boy who gets beat up on the schoolyard, right?
Yeah.
It's just, does that little boy get up and go back to the schoolyard the next day to fight again, right? And I was always the little boy who did. And so that's what I did. I dusted myself off. My therapist and I were like, you know what? It sounds corny to say my therapist is an old punk, but like, it was like, all right, man, now the real game has begun. Now the real fight has begun. And I will say a few things about the whole Oprah thing. Like, people are always like, well, Oprah must have been so hard for your career. And I was like, well, I was number one on the Times list for 25 weeks before Oprah and 58 after. So things worked out. My next book hit number 1, too.
Yeah.
My next book after that hit number 1, too. My next book after that hit number 1, too. Right? All of them, these radical books written with my fingers up, actually in defiance even more after the Oprah stuff. And it was like, I'm not going to let you stop me. This is the game I came to play. It hurts like fuck. You have beaten the shit out of me. I'm lying on the ground, blood, bruises, probably a couple broken bones, but I'm getting up. You cannot stop me.
There's a couple. I love that. There's a couple things I want to sit down and hear. One is, and I got to write this down because I forget it. There's a misunderstanding between the concept of literature as the Oprah Book Club conceives of it and as you may conceive of it. And what I hear you saying is, I think the book club people are going to think a memoir has got to be true. My personal opinion is, how the fuck can any memoir be true? It's just memory anyway.
As I said, like,
right.
When Picasso painted a self-portrait, did it have to be photographically perfect? Or was he given the liberty to portray himself in whatever way he felt?
Or, as you say, you're trying to portray a feeling. And to get to that feeling, you're going to go, turn it up to 11 or whatever. If
40.
What happened was a 6, then you're going to turn it up to, that's the kind of a thing. I mean, it's kind of.
But that's also what we all do as artists.
Yes.
I know when
absolutely.
You're an actor, like in a moment, you're not going in there for the 6.
No.
You're going in there for the 11.
No. And, you hope you have a good editor. To kind of take to take your best 11 moments. But I think you're also, what year is that? What year is this happening?
2005 and 6.
We're perched there at the beginning of we don't even know what's coming at us in terms of truth and fiction. We don't even know. You're an author who's being held to account for facts. And now we have politicians who are not held to account for facts. It's so kind of ironic and ridiculous to think that you were burned at the stake for exaggeration and for fiction in a memoir, very little of it anyway, and that now we progressed beyond even thinking that there is a fact.
Even at the time, Dick Cheney was telling us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, man. Exactly. Like I always use that example. Yeah. And even in today, like I'm doing a bunch of media for this book. I haven't talked to the media in America in 15 years, but I'm doing a bunch for this.
I hope you don't think of me as the media.
Oh, I don't. I think of you as like hopefully a new friend I'm having a cool conversation with. But like when you talk to the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or Vanity Fair, they like fact check the fuck out of you, and that's
Yeah.
fine. But I did say something to him. I'm like, I find it ironic that after 25 years, you're still fact checking the fuck out of me
Yeah.
while you let politicians say whatever the fuck they want. Art is held to a greater standard of truth than the leaders of our nation.
Yeah. Well, if I had a mic to drop, I'd drop it. And it pisses me off. It's a bit of a magic trick, what an author does, what an artist does. It's a magic trick. I wrote this script for the X-Files, and it came out, and I was accused of plagiarism by somebody who had submitted an unsolicited script. Now, the policy of all the writers, and I'm not even in the writer's room where that thing might have come, is to not open any of that. That's just common sense. You don't, that's not how scripts are submitted. So I was like, I know I didn't plagiarize it. So I'm like, hey, bring it on. Yeah, let's talk about this. This is fun, you know? So the lawyers called me and they said, well, yeah, they've got a decent case. I was like, decent case? How the fuck can I have a decent case? Because I didn't plagiarize this. And they said, well, in their script, people come back from the dead. And I was like,
oh,
I was like, okay, all right. So zombies, all right.
New idea.
And in their script and your script, people come back from the dead. In their script and your script, there's a Beatles reference. And in their script,
band in history.
And in their script and your script, Mulder and Scully eat popcorn. And I was like, that's a decent case. And what I realized is the law, and in general, not just the law, but consciousness of a non-artistic consciousness, has no idea how to approach the concept of creation, so that they try and backload it. You know, like how you got here
Right.
by popcorn.
Right.
You got here by Beatles, and therefore, and they would ask me, how did you come up with this?
You had to have read that to have thought of the Beatles
Right.
and popcorn
Right.
in a television show.
So, but what I'm saying is, like, these are, you know, good lawyers, and they're talking about plagiarism law, and if you extend that to consciousness of a public in general, there isn't a lawful way, and we're talking with Oprah here about truth and fiction. There's an inability to kind of comprehend the alchemy that goes on when you write, and to try to figure out what is truth and fiction and all that, even in something that's a memoir. So to me, it's a non-starter kind of a controversy. I know that it was painful for you and life-changing and a wonderful disaster as you're talking about it, but it's frustrating to me to have gone through, you know, obviously that was in private.
It was frustrating for me, man. Like, part of it was fun and thrilling, and certainly a lot of it was a nightmare. Like, I was married, I had a young child. Certainly my former wife and child didn't deserve to have to, like, deal with all that shit.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, like, I really do think of it as like, it was the game I always wanted to play. It's just that you don't know what it's actually like until you play that game, right? Like,
yeah.
Professional athletes don't know what it's like to be in the NFL till some motherfucker lights them up. And I got lit up. And then from there, I truly do think, like, anybody who makes something great or bold in their life, you're going to get lit up by somebody. So it's, how do you respond? How do you react to the failure, to the hurt, to the pain, to the obstacle, to whatever it is? It's all about just, can you keep going? Can you wake up every day and say, you know what, I don't give a fuck what anybody has to say?
Well, what you're saying is, too, it's a kind of a gut check back to, well, what's my authentic inspiration here? You know, why?
Right.
So you wanted to, this is what you wanted. This is what you wanted. And you've said that. But I have also seen where you've said that the book isn't self-help, but part of the book is to speak to addicts. Part of the book was to help addicts who are struggling. And that's a very different motivation from both middle fingers up. So and I'm not saying that one is true and the other isn't. I can hold both those thoughts at the same time as I think you can. But can you speak to that a little bit?
The way I approached that was, you read, and even still today, but especially back then, I'd read tons of stuff about being a drug addict, right? But I'd never read anything that got to the real core of it. I never got to somebody saying, I'm going to bare my fucking soul to you. I'm going to tell you my deepest, darkest secrets. I'm going to tell you all of the terrible things. Essentially, like, it's what you do in AA as one of the steps. And I'm going to go there and make it try to make it as painful and as terrifying and as brutal as it was for me. And then also show that there was a way out of it for me. One of the reasons I did write the book, and I do think art can have motivations beyond the sake of purely making art.
Yeah.
But I knew a lot of drug addicts. The world was very different. Back in the 90s, especially the early 90s, if you went to rehab, you were fucked up. It was like going to prison. There were very few of them. Only terribly fucked up people went. I went there, and at least half of the people that I was in there with who had seen brutality. This was the age of crack, right?
This is just say no. This is considered a moral failing on your part if you're addicted to something.
All of it, right? A moral failing. You're a bad. Like I said, it wasn't much different than going to prison. And at least half of the people I met in the facility I was in didn't believe in God or AA. And I understood that, because it's hard to believe in God after you've seen and felt some of the things me or some of those people have seen and felt. And so I wrote a book, like, you don't need God. Again, if anything, it's more to the punk of it. You don't need fucking 12 rules. If you're going to submit your life to the 12 rules, good luck. They work for a lot of people, but they don't. If they don't work for you, here's how some crazy ass crackhead got out, right? By the strength of his will, by meditation, by Taoism, by willing to accept any pain that came my way and believe that I could get through it.
Can you open up a little bit on the what do you think it is in Taoism or Stoicism, which I've seen you speak of as well, that got you through, or that matured you, or that enabled you to be sober?
For me, sobriety is a very simple thing. It doesn't mean it's easy, simple, and whether something is hard or not. And for me, it was, okay, the simplest resolution here is stop. So then once you figure out that, which is pretty obvious, how to stop. And I do feel like I gave the steps and some traditional method of God some reasonable chance, but just like a song or a work of art, not everything always connects with your soul, right? And that didn't. And I remember my brother brought me a copy of the Tao translated by Stephen Mitchell, and I read it.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
And the translated title of the book is The Art of the Way.
Yeah.
The Art of the Way of Life. How to get through life as peacefully and as peacefully as possible. And it was the first thing I had ever read of any kind of religious or philosophical document that just made sense. Like, live simply, simple in thought, simple in action. Have patience with yourselves, have patience with others. Have compassion for yourselves, have compassion for others. Those are the fundamental tenets of Taoism. To accept that I'm in trouble, to accept that I feel pain, to accept that whatever life throws at me, I can take it, and I can just let it go, right? A lot of the Taoist things and the sort of AA and recovery things do match up a lot. Letting things go.
Yes. Accepting
the world as it is. Accepting responsibility for yourself in the world and for your own actions in the world. You could say Taoism is my AA God, but it's just a sort of a slightly different system. And meditation brings me peace every day. And that piece allows me to get through the rest of the day. And it's really as simple as that.
Well, it also seems to me like when you describe your process of writing, that you've managed to find a balance in your life where, if you're meditating and you're contemplating the Tao, the way, then you go into your workroom and then you stimulate those the parts that used to drive you to drugs, and you channel them into the work, or it's if you're.
And even that is a reflection of Taoism, the black and the white balancing each other out, the good and the bad balancing each other out, accepting that we have both of them within us. I accept that I can be a brutal person, not good, not kind, not gentle, that there are things in me that aren't cool. I can also accept that I can be an exceptionally good human being, kind, generous, loving, helpful in whatever way I can be. And to me, finding that center space where I accept both of those things, and in some way I honor both of those things, and I allow both of those things to exist within me, is the best way for me.
This is an ad by BetterHelp. When I think about my health, I'm proud to say that I care about my mind, my mood, and my psychological well-being. I know that for many men, there's an expectation to ignore feelings, and put on a tough exterior. So I'm here to say that there's strength to be found in opening up what you're carrying and doing something about it, not pushing it away. Therapy is a great place to start. It's a way to work on what's important for you and your lifestyle, whether that's getting some help understanding your responses to the world or developing positive coping skills for when you face obstacles. Fortunately, giving therapy a try has never been easier, especially with BetterHelp. You can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. And as the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/failbetter. That's betterhelp.com/failbetter. You teach as well, no? You mentor, or you don't?
I help a lot of people for sure. Yeah. I don't formally teach.
But you don't, because I was curious as to how someone who admittedly breaks rules teaches rules. How do you teach a writer?
I don't really teach rules. I teach people to be true to what they feel inside themselves, right? If somebody's most perfect and most authentic means of expression is with absolutely precise grammar, great. What I tell people is learn to manage your fear. The thing that stops most people from being great at anything is fear of failure.
Manage that. Shame around that.
Shame, fear of failure, right? And then it's just do your work, right? One word after another. If you focus on the next word and that's it, everything's good. And I try to teach people to, we all have our own way of thinking and feeling and speaking and living, and art should be the perfect expression of someone's inner self. And I just teach people to do that. A lot of it is discipline. A lot of it is you can go to school and they'll teach you grammar, but they can't teach you how to sit in a fucking chair every day for a year and stare at an empty screen and go back every day with some sort of fundamental faith that you can do what you want to do. That's what I teach people how to do. I don't teach them how to write. I don't tell them how to write. I don't tell them the stories to tell. I tell them how to approach things in a way that will help them actually probably achieve what they want, as opposed to just thinking about achieving what they want.
So it's a discipline. The discipline is a discipline.
I mean, I help a lot of people sort of very discreetly with cancellation and with addiction. I can't tell you how many calls I get still all the time from people who are either having drug problems or someone they love, or when people go through cancellation, what do I do now? And I don't pretend to be an expert, but I can tell them what worked for me. But I like helping people. I think it's important. There were people who helped me on my way up. I think it's good to be kind in the world. I think it's good to make it a better place if you can. And if talking to somebody for 10 minutes a couple times a week helps them out, I'm down.
Let's talk about the new book, Next to Heaven. I see a thread from the Tao and pre-psychological texts to you. And I see, now that I know about your the way you create, I see you kind of trying to circumvent the interpretation of the feeling and just get the feeling down. And when I look at the way your prose sits on a page, it looks more screenplay-like than novelistic. So it tends towards more of a dialogue feeling prose than a descriptive or flowery or interior monologue prose. And I'm wondering if anything I'm saying is making any sense to you in terms of your style or in this book particularly.
It does make sense. Like, again, when I was teaching myself how to write, there were a lot of things I was thinking about, right? I was thinking about, okay, you have to write in a way that's not like anyone else, that doesn't look like it, feel like it, sound like it, read like it, right? So I started playing with a lot of these tricks. And again, as you were talking about sort of pre-Freudian versus Taoism, Taoism at its core seeks simplicity and seeks directness and seeks clarity, right? Simple, clear, and direct in thought and action and life. And I went that way, and I still do for my writing. Simple, clear, and direct. I'm going to tell you what's happening. I'm going to tell you where it's happening, how it's happening, what it looks like, smells like, sounds like, and most important, what it feels like, right? And I'm going to try to be as simple and clear and direct as I can in doing that.
It sounds to me like what you're going for, or instinctually what you were going for, is a more unmediated way of communicating. It sounds like you are feeling like grammar's getting in the way of just the brute instinct of what I want to say.
That was a beautiful way to put it that I've never heard said. But yes, it was. Can you write a book the way the Sex Pistols wrote God Save the Queen? Can you write a book that makes you feel the way you feel when you look at a Jackson Pollock painting? Can you write a book that has the power that, thundering guitars and bass do? Can you write a book that does what I said, what I wanted to do, which is shatter all these rules and utterly ignore them and defy them and still have it be a readable document, an entertaining document, a moving document, a valid work of literary art. And those were things I thought about for years and struggled with. I wrote 3 books that 2 of them I threw in the Seine, literally in the 90s, like printed out books that I wrote, that I read, and they were so bad.
That hurts me. I hate throwing shit away. I'm always like, I can repurpose this somehow.
No, there was no repurposing any of it. I actually have the notebooks that I used to write those books still. So I have the core material. My kid was looking, my 18-year-old son was looking through them, and he was like, Dad, you seems like you had kind of a cool life and you were kind of a fucking idiot. And I was like, yeah.
What you were saying, I have 2 thoughts. One is, it sounds to me like I'm surprised that you didn't go to poetry, because that's where you can kind of rewrite your own rules of grammar. And aside from the fact that, nobody reads it, you might have had a thought of like, well, I would like an audience. And secondly, what you were saying reminds me of this possibly apocryphal story I've heard about Christopher Walken, who is somebody whose cadence everybody imitates. And what I've been told is, as soon as he gets his script, he takes out all punctuation from his dialogue so that he finds his way to the meaning without, as you were saying. without these kinds of marks that people that have come before have said, I need to put in here to make it legible and understandable.
That's really interesting about Walken, because one of the things I said is like, my goal is to communicate what I feel in my soul as clearly and as precisely as possible. And one of the reasons I originally rejected grammar is because it didn't mimic speech, right? That as I write, I say everything out loud, and it's much more important to me how it feels, the rhythm of it, the sound of it. So before I write anything, I always say it out loud, and that's how I arrived at how I use grammar, having no quotation marks. Like when you and I speak to each other, I don't say, I say, David.
Yes, right.
Right? I just fucking talk. Part of the way the books look and the way the books are written is you talk about poetry, or one of the things I do think I have done as a writer is demolish the ideas of these genres, right? I don't write fiction. I don't write nonfiction. I both write poetry and don't write poetry. If you look at how those books are laid out, there's pages of one or two words a line, just strings of words designed to make you think and feel things that is much more closer. But when I think about the book, it's, what's the story I want to tell? What do I want people to feel? I've written lots of serious books about drugs, about love. I wrote a book called The Final Testament of the Holy Bible about the second coming of Christ. This book, I just wanted to let it rip and have fun. We're living in this world that's utter madness. And during the pandemic, somebody had asked me to read Hollywood Wives by Jackie Collins.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, I feel like somebody must have already is wanting to adapt this, because it feels like it slots really well into kind of you know, the White Lotus crowd before they go on vacation. You know, this is them in their actual home, and it's also it's also in the, you know, Nicole Kidman baby girl kind of area where the women are ultimately using sex in this world to win,
as a weapon.
Yeah.
No, I read Jackie Collins. Somebody wanted me to adapt it, a new version of Hollywood Wives, and I wanted to do a much rowdier version of it than they did. But after I read it, I was like, that was fucking great. And I was like,
the book Hollywood Wives was great. Yeah.
It was. Have you ever read it?
No, I haven't.
It's fucking awesome, dude. You should totally read it. You'll love it. So then I read Hollywood Husbands, right? I read a couple Danielle Steele books.
Really?
They're all great. People kind of make fun of them, but they're fucking great. For what they are, they're spectacular. And I was like, what would a book like that look like if I wrote it? What would a book look like in the age we live in? And I live and have long lived in the wealthiest town in the country. This secretive, incredibly discreet, highly protected bubble of New Canaan, Connecticut. And it is a beautiful place to live, and it is an interesting and weird place to live. And whenever I write a book up, I always say all my job really is to do is hold a mirror up to society and show you what you look like, right? As we were talking about, sort of doing that to ourselves earlier, right? And so I held up a mirror to the community I live in, which is absurdly wealthy, absurdly privileged. All kinds of weird, crazy, dumb shit happens here, and it mostly makes me laugh. And so I wanted to write a fun, dirty, kind of satirical book about fucking rich people.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. Do you want to? I mean, the inciting event here is an orgy with, I believe, engraved invitations, as only I imagine New Canaan, Connecticut would do.
Yeah. So New Canaan has a history of this kind of stuff.
Does it?
The Key Party was invented here. The Stepford Wives was set here. What was that swingers movie? Tobey Maguire swingers movie?
The Ice Storm
was also set here.
Yeah.
There is a history of this type of activity, and I started thinking about it, and what would it be like, and why would somebody do it, and in the sort of absurdity of the setting, how would things happen? And yeah, it's a dirty, funny, sharp murder mystery about a swingers party at a billionaire's house.
But what I think is formidable about the plot in this case is, as I said in the earlier, is that, you know, men think that they're running the sex game, but
Right.
No.
Well, that for sure. Anybody who's been married knows the men aren't in fucking charge of anything, right? Anybody who's on a movie set run by a woman knows men aren't in charge of anything. And I do see sex increasingly used as a weapon, I think. I think it probably always has, but like in today's world, with sexual politics being as complicated as they are, relationship politics being as complicated as they are, fucking identity politics being as complicated as they are, that people are able to use sex as a weapon in ways that they haven't before. You know, I think sometimes about Me Too, and I certainly don't support anybody who abused anybody in any way, but it wasn't only, I've worked in Hollywood for 30 years, man. I've had more women hit on me than men have hit on me, and those kinds of things work everywhere, and frankly, women are just as guilty of those types of situations.
Well, you're stepping right into a defiant position again, which is where you're comfortable. You know, are you expecting to be attacked in a way for this?
I'm always attacked, man.
Yeah.
I'm always attacked for something, but I'm just saying, like, sex is a weapon that both men and women use, right? And we like to think often that men are these terrible, aggressive monsters, and women are demure and helpless and can do nothing in the face of this monstrosity. But the reality is sexual politics are very, very complicated, and sex is used as a weapon by both men and women. And I see in these communities, these very wealthy communities that I have lived in for large portions of my life, the men are off working and the women sort of very much run things. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just how it fucking is. And I wanted to tell that story. And I think a lot of the women marry men and then they realize, holy fuck, this guy's a monster, but you can't fucking get out of it, right? You're in a golden prison of some kind. And I wanted to have fun. The book was fun to write.
Yeah, what I do,
I probably just got myself in huge amounts of trouble.
Well, are you concerned of shitting where you eat? Are you concerned when the book comes out that your idyllic existence, quiet existence there is going to get complicated?
Nope. I live in a black house at the end of the road at the end of a dead end road in the woods, right? Somebody's coming, I know. But I mean, I've taught. There's a lot of gossip around the town right now about me and the book, and I'm just I'll just go about my business the same way I always have, right?
Yeah.
I'll be the best dad I can. I'll be the best friend I can. I'll be the best coworker I can. I'll be the best writer I can.
It doesn't sound to me like it's a Truman Capote situation where your book sounds very fictionalized to me. It's not where you're giving away actual secrets.
No, I don't generally use books to settle scores. Right. I may in the future, actually, though. I've been thinking about it. I have a couple scores I wouldn't mind settling, but no, like none of the characters are based on real people, but the book is very much based in reality. I think, like a lot of my books, half the people in this town are going to read it and say, he's a fucking piece of shit, and this is a desecration of our beautiful town. And I think half the people are going to read the book and be like, thank God somebody was willing to say it.
Well, that's the position that you like. You like to be half loved and half hated.
Yeah, I always tell people that's how I know when I'm going to quit. I'm going to quit writing books when I'm either universally loved or universally hated, because I will know I have failed. But until I am, I'm going to keep going.
Absolutely. The last quote that I wanted to run by you is from your book, The Final Testament of the Holy Bible. And you write that trauma is survivable, but often not much more. It kills you while allowing you to still live. I feel like that's bleaker than your actual thoughts, because obviously what you went through is traumatizing, but maybe because you were an adult, it's more survivable and you weren't a child. I don't know.
I mean, I will say the Bible was written after I had had a child die.
Oh.
I had a son who died of a disease called spinal muscular atrophy, which is like childhood ALS.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was coming off all what people think about as the trauma of Oprah, and then my son died, right?
Right.
And again, that was sort of a reframing moment, where you think, oh, yeah, everybody thinks that this experience you've had is so tough or so traumatic, and then you live out a very legitimately tough, traumatic moment in private. And more than any book, the Bible is an expression of human pain. The Bible is a book that I wrote to keep myself alive. It was, all right, kill yourself, get drunk, or write a really, really hard book. And I wrote the book. But I do think that statement is maybe not necessarily true to my life and my experience, but true to a lot of people. I think so many people in their lives get or experience trauma that annihilates them. They never recover from it. They never are willing to allow themselves to recover from it. And if my life or my career or this conversation is about anything, it's that you can recover. You can recover. I've recovered from addiction. I've recovered from a girlfriend dying, a best friend dying, a child dying. I've recovered from public controversies, humiliations, embarrassments, situations, whatever you want to call them. Because I get up every day and I say, you can keep going, man. You're not done yet. You choose the conditions of your life. I wish everybody did that. And if you learn anything from me, it's that you should, right? Keep fucking going.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, David. This was a pleasure. And it's a real honor to be here. It sounds corny. I've been a fan of yours for fucking 35 years.
It does sound corny, but I'll never get tired of hearing it. Thanks so much for listening to Fail Better. If you haven't yet, now is a great time to subscribe to Lemonada Premium. You'll get bonus content like my thoughts on conversations with guests including Alec Baldwin and Rob Lowe. Just hit the subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, or for all other podcast apps, head to lemonadapremium.com to subscribe. That's lemonadapremium.com. Fail Better is a production of Lemonada Media in coordination with King Baby. It is produced by Keegan Zema, Aria Bracci, and Donnie Matias. Our engineer is Brian Castillo. Our SVP of Weekly is Steve Nelson. Our VP of New Content is Rachel Neal. Special thanks to Carl Ackerman, Tom Kupinski, and Brad Davidson. The show is executive produced by Stephanie Whittles-Wax, Jessica Cordova-Kramer, and me, David Duchovny. The music is also by me and my band, the lovely Colin Lee, Pat McCusker, Mitch Stewart, Davis Rowan, and Sebastian Modak. You can find us online at Lemonada Media, and you can find me at David Duchovny. Follow Fail Better wherever you get your podcasts, or listen ad-free on Amazon Music with your Prime membership.